All right, guys, let's try that again. Uno, dos, tres. All right, we have today the 650 TR. That's a Husqvarna. There are two versions of the TR650. There is the Strata, which is this bike here, and then they have the Terra. And the Terra has spoked wheels, so it's a little bit higher. Let's see, now on this one right here, there's a lot of interesting things to talk about on this bike, but let's start with the things this one has. So it's got what you would call an engine guard. It's really kind of a tank guard, guards the fairings there. It's got a good size skid plate on it, and that's, I think, about it. Let me take a look around here really quick. We've got some hand guards for this one. Anyways, so that is the stock pieces of the bike. Now there are interesting parts about this bike. Oh hey, it also has the LED headlight, which makes it a bit brighter. So Husqvarna has gone through quite a few changes in ownership. So at the time in 2013, BMW had influence over Husqvarna, and you end up with really a lot of BMW type parts on this bike. Even the handguards are labeled BMW. So there's some similarities crossing over to BMW rather than like today KTM. Support for all their bikes is still pretty wonderful for such a small company. So any KTM dealer services your Husqvarnas of pretty much any year. Anyways, until you get back to little old, then really, really old bikes. Anyways, where does this bike sit? Okay, so well, it sits right here, but this bike is somewhere between a Supermoto and an Enduro, and it has the looks of kind of an Enduro bike, especially with the aggressive knobby tires that are on this one. The Terra with the spoked wheels has a 21-inch front wheel, and then you can go a bit more with the knobby type tires. The handling and characteristics of both bikes are a bit somewhere between the Enduro and the Supermoto. So you'll find the bikes, either one of them, sort of sitting in that area. There's really not a competition in that realm of bike. Even today you've got the KTM 690 Enduro, the Husqvarna 701 Enduro, and they both have a Supermoto, they're SM. And this really does sit somewhere in between. You sit a bit lower, so it's got a lower seat height, especially with the Strata. This one actually has the seat concept seat with it as well, which is just a bit lower as well. So surely flat-footed on this bike, no problem at all. That's kind of a nice thing. Style-wise, you got the dual exhaust on a single-cylinder motor. It just adds a bit of weight, but so you can see right down here where it goes from 1 to 2, but it sure is a cool styling cue. A lot of people opt to change that out and put a single exhaust on it, but it looks cool, and this bike sounds pretty good. Let's start her up. Single cylinder. And I think we should take it out for a ride. We'll just do a short ride today. It's only about 35 degrees out, so I probably won't go on my longest tours as I normally do. This does have ABS. You can turn off the ABS by this red button right here. As far as other amenities with this motorcycle, there's not a lot of frills or the electronic stuff with traction control, the power modes and all of that. You don't need it on a bike that's under probably 60 horsepower ish. I didn't look that up, so you guys can look that up and figure out where I am on that. I know the 701 has about 75 horsepower. But even so, we got plenty of power to pull the front wheel up, and relatively smooth at speed. We're doing about, let's go to about 70 miles an hour. It's pretty smooth. This is geared down just a little bit, so I'm at about 4,800 RPM at about 70 miles an hour. You could gear it back up, and that would bring you down to about 4,500 RPM at about 7,500 or 70 to 75 miles an hour. Now, one of the cool features of this bike is what we're about to do right now. That's going around corners. Even with these knobbies on it, the bike handles really well. So that's where you kind of feel it's like kind of Supermoto-ish versus Enduro, but it doesn't have the tiny little wheels that the Supermoto does, and so you have a bit more flexibility in going and doing some off-road stuff. So a lot of times you see the off-road tires on these bikes because guys want to take them off-road, do adventures on them. So turning this into an adventure bike is pretty simple. Some add to that rack that's on here, and away you go. Having the a 50/50 tire is pretty cool. I might go more towards a bit more street because this bike would be so fun in the canyons. You don't have to be all out Supermoto, but you know, with a bit more street-worthy tires, this bike would really hook up around corners. It would be just an amazing amazing tool in the canyons. Power-wise, 650 has plenty of power. Even 2-up bike would have plenty of power to pull. And so as far as, let's say, any kind of vibration, it's a single cylinder. And if I compare this to, say, the 690, KTM 690, it's very similar. If I compare it to the 701, this is a bit more has a bit more vibration because the 701 has a secondary counterbalancer, and that makes it really smooth. Another bike you might consider when you're looking at this is something like the a BMW and the F650 or G650 GS, and they make the Surtao, which, and the standard version. And I would say that, you know, this is going to have better suspension than the standard version, and some people would argue this has better suspension than the Surtao's long travel suspension, but I would probably disagree. This has a larger size fork, but not as much travel, and it makes this a very stable bike, and especially on the road. So for on the road, you know, it just depends what you want to do, and that's why I kind of set this bike, and when I picture it, it's right between the Supermoto and the Enduro, and you could do both. Kind of a cool idea there. I'm flat-footed completely on this bike, which is nice, and then I'm not super cramped when I have my feet on the pegs, so that's kind of a nice setup. Pretty comfortable. The seat is pretty comfortable, but I can't move around a lot because it's got that low perch. There's sort of a saddle, and so I can't move around on the bike, which is fine. But that would, you know, for all-day comfort, it'd be okay. It just depends on your size. So I'm 6 foot tall. If I were any taller, it would still be fine. I'm just looking at the ergonomics here. But definitely shorter riders would be very comfortable on this bike. You can sit pretty well flat-footed, or, you know, if you're even, you know, 5'4" or 5'2", you probably could, you wouldn't be flat-footed, but you could still be seated pretty well. Going over speed bumps, this thing's got plenty of suspension for all of that, and be plenty for off-road riding on the say dirt roads, things like that. It might feel like a bike of this size. It doesn't feel heavy. It doesn't feel bulky. It feels really narrow. And you could lose some weight here if you wanted to. You could lose that. If you pulled that exhaust off, I think you'd lose 25 pounds. You just go to a single exhaust. But, you know, really not necessary. I think it looks It certainly looks the part. It's really cool. Tires are on this bike are just about shot, so these are the TKC 80s. I would probably go to a little bit more street-oriented tire, just to have either, this is more of a 50-50 type tire, and they do handle pretty well on road, but I think you gain a little bit more for the on-road stuff if you had just a bit more of a street-oriented tire. But hey, if you're going to do trails, then these are awesome tires. Let's see, anything else about this bike? I think we've kind of covered it. It's a fun little bike. It's got a new chain, new sprockets. It's sweet. So anyways, guys, this is the Husqvarna. It is the TR650, and this one is the Strata. Boom.